friends, do we have a unique and first time experience for us because we have Meme Callnin, good friend, and also recently retired partner and executive from a global HR consulting firm who has transitioned, and this is the new thing that we've never had before, into an independent board director. And so we're going to talk a bit about what that looks like for her and her pursuit to help boards and the board work she's done, etc. So welcome, Meme.
Welcome, Meme. All right.
Glad to be here. You guys have been asking me to do this for a while, so I'm glad we found a time that works for both of us.
I know, and I'm actually kind of excited because when we'd asked you before, you hadn't retired yet, you hadn't moved into this new world of board director work, and so you're our first to be able to talk to you about things like that, which is really exciting.
Now, before we get to that, I want to say full disclosure. Our son and your daughter were in kindergarten together. Now that was a while back.
We're not going to say how old her daughter and our son are. 25.
They're old.
So we've known each other.
Make me feel old.
That's right.
We've known each other at least 20 years, which is very cool. Like a fine wine, getting better with time.
So before we get to the board work, Meme, I would like to first talk about how you got here. Give us just a little information about Meme, where you started, how you grew up in your career, and kind of how you ended your career.
Sure. So I won't go through all the details because there's lots of changes, but I started right out of school, and I'll kind of tie this together with my advice at the end. Right out of school, I started with a global HR consulting firm, but as a computer programmer. I majored in computer science and quickly realized that I'm not a computer programmer. I need to be with people. I'm very, that's not me sitting behind a desk. So I basically stayed in that industry my entire career. I've been a double boomerang between two different organizations that are in this space over the course of my career. And along the way, I shifted to consulting and focused more on supporting clients around design and kept broadening the realm of what I understood and what I did. And at some point, I took this class called Influential Leadership because I had decided I didn't want to manage people because that wasn't fun. I didn't like it. So I took this course that actually Aon offered called Influential Leadership. And during that, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a way to be a leader and you don't have to manage people, which for me was awesome. And so about that time, an opportunity presented itself where I could go and lead a market and have no one reporting to me initially. I eventually hired some people, but I got to pick them. It was kind of cool. And really loved the idea of using my energy and my experience and my knowledge to lead and drive people. And then that was probably, gosh, this ages me a bit, 20 years ago that I discovered this and got into that space. And ever since then, I've just been continuing to kind of grow the realm of what I oversee or what I lead. And I ended my career as what we called a market growth leader for Mercer, a global HR consulting firm. And in that realm, I oversaw everything that Mercer did. I'll use their words, health, wealth, career, which is everything around how you manage people and employees if you're an employer, and supported some of our largest, most complex clients and helping them drive their human capital strategy. I love how my career kind of wrapped with a bow. Perfect timing for me, and we'll talk a little bit about kind of what made me make this epiphany. But if I look back over the course of my career, it has been a phenomenal career. I learned a lot. I grew a lot. I made amazing friends along the way, people that I met through my children, as well as people that I met, that I worked with. And I feel very fulfilled by the way I spent my career.
And Meme, I want to make sure I understood this correctly because I did not know this about you. You studied computer programming?
I was a computer science major.
That's fascinating to me.
I think it's fantastic. And yes. I also love that, you said, and I quickly realized that was not my path. And I think it's so interesting to me. We've raised children. We have this sense, especially the Z generation has this sense of, I've got to do what it is I went to school to do. And meanwhile, I've had several careers and my degree is in music theater. So we all know that we can have a very different path. So just thinking, kind of moving into the now, what was it that, your corporate career is coming to a close? I think if I recall, you were starting to think about independent board director work before you retired. And I know you've been on several different nonprofit boards as well. And so can you tell me, what was it that drew you to working on a board?
So a couple of things. As I mentioned, throughout my career, I worked with a lot of organizations, and I would help them with strategy and design and figuring out how they wanted to support their employees. As a consultant, you have ideas, and then they go on and do it, and you're not part of it. About 5 years ago, I realized there was this whole other role out there. I always knew there was board members, but I didn't really know what it meant. But I realized there was this whole different path where I could actually be part of an organization and influence not just one, but influence multiple organizations where I'm on their board to help them set direction, set strategy, manage risk, whatever it is, but truly have an impact in a very different and impactful way, as opposed to just being on the outside looking in as a consultant. So that got me excited. I know me, and everybody says, oh, you can never retire because I'll never be able to sit still. So this is a way for me to stay engaged in the corporate world I've always known and loved being part of, but do it in a very different way. And so I started to think about, gosh, I really could do this. And then I took a course. I took the Harvard Executive Program has a course on women on boards. And I did that at the end of 2023. And that's when I was like, wow, this is super exciting for me. And that's when I started to really get serious about, I'm going to make this change.
Oh, I love that so much. And I know you and I have worked together in the past with a particular passion that we both share, which is increasing the number of females, of women on boards. And I know that you're involved pretty, I guess, successfully, I should say, and consistently with, it was Women on Boards 2020, now 50. And I'd love to hear about that as well. I know Bruce might have a question though before we move forward. Is that okay?
Yeah, you answer that and then I'll ask my question.
I would love for you to talk about that because I think getting more women on boards is a must. So
it is. And in the current environment that we're living in, it's a must in a different way. And I think one of the reasons, putting aside women versus men versus people of color, diversity on a board, diversity in thought, diversity in background. And if you think about a woman and a man, just the way we think traditionally, even that brings diversity. So to me, that doesn't change no matter what's happening in our society. And, there's all sorts of stats that show that boards that have women have, better, more profitability, better outcomes, better, results. So I got involved, and back in 2020, when you and I were there together, that was the first year that we hit that goal of having 20% of the board seats on the Russell 3000 be filled by women. So it was a big, yay, celebration. Fast forward now, and we're in, what year is it, 2025, and now we've just crossed the threshold of 30% of women, of Russell 3000 seats are filled by women, blah, blah, blah. What's scary though is that has slowed. It's just increasing by like 1% a year now, so it's slowed down. So the group I'm involved in, we're doing a big awareness educational thing in May, and it's really about bringing women together and men. We'll call them allies that we hope will join us as well. So Bruce, I hope you're coming. And the goal.
I've just been told I'm coming. So
yes, she does it a lot. So I see you a lot. So I like that. So But the goal is to really help women just understand better their path and how to do it. And, so it's pretty exciting. We have a pretty exciting group of people involved. And by virtue of that, part of my goal and getting on boards is networking with other people on board so I can help hone in on where I want to be and where I can have the impact. I'm meeting so many incredible women who are on boards that live here in Denver. It's like a whole new world has opened up to me and a whole new network of people, which has been a lot of fun.
I love that.
Well, it's good. Mimi, what would you say, looking at your corporate experience, and now that you're looking at this transition, what would you say is the most important things that you're bringing, or that you feel like you can influence boards with from your corporate perspective?
So one of the things when you're on a board, it's fingers out, heads in, or heart in, whatever you want to say, the way you want to look at it. But you're not supposed to be in the details. So as a consultant, back to the fact that I consulted, I didn't actually deliver the work. The organizations had to do that. So I got really good at stepping back and really listening and asking the questions to help organizations or my clients realize where they needed to go. You can't really come in and say XYZ. Clients don't like that. You need to kind of bring them along with the conversation and the journey. So as a board member, being able to ask those questions, sometimes tough questions, but being able to ask those questions, I think is one of the gifts that I bring. I'm not shy, as y'all know, so I will ask questions. The other thing is my entire career has been focused on human capital. Well, human capital, the people of an organization are what makes or breaks an organization. So I really understand the impact of having an engaged population or a good culture and things like that can really help an organization succeed. So bringing that lens is another asset that I bring. And what makes me a bit unique is I've always been a growth leader. So you guys know I'm a sales DNA guy. Gal, that's how I'm wired. And so kind of wrapping all this, asking questions. And again, I'm always going to have a lens of kind of growth as I ask the questions. I'm going to have a lens of people as I ask the questions, but I'm always going to be thinking about what can we do to grow? And so those are kind of three unique things. When you bundle them together, they're unique. Each of them of themselves is not unique, but bundling it together, I think is a unique aspect that I can bring to any board.
I love that. What do you think? The boards of yesterday are definitely not the boards of today. Yeah. We know that, especially when we're dealing with, the pandemic was a real disruptor. We potentially are in one right now with markets being a bit unsteady. What would you say is, how can a board be most effective? What makes a board really, really effective today?
Well, there's lots of things that will always be around. Good communication, again, fingers out, heart in, that will never change. But I do think I'm actually taking a class on corporate risk governance through the DCRO Institute. And one of the things I've always in my career had to manage risk in very different ways, many different things that impact risk. But one of the things that I think organizations really need to focus on is not just what are the risks we need to be careful, they're scary, versus, hey, what are the risks that are out there for us as a business? What do we need to do differently to manage those risks and see around the corner? And by the way, that can lead to innovation. So learning to not be afraid and just shut down versus let's embrace risk and figure out how to navigate it, I think is something that boards, with cybersecurity out there, the cyber risks, AI, and all the things, the components, boy, that's innovative and scary. There's lots of risks there. So there's just different people risks, talent is an issue, getting and retaining good talent. There's just different risks than there used to be. And so boards have to think differently. And I guess that's a lens through this course. I'm realizing I've always had to think about it, but I'm thinking about it in a more of a framework from a board lens. And I'm pretty excited actually about how to think about it differently and how to ask questions when people are locking down because of risk, to ask a question and make people go, oh, maybe actually this is an opportunity for us. Let's figure this out.
Yeah, I love that. There's a lot of both in the corporate world and in the board world where they say, oh, we're going to be innovative. And then they get real stuck and caught up in that data governance and they avoid risk because they're supposed to be the ones that are, mitigating it and navigating it and making sure that the company stays financially profitable and healthy. So
now, I think the term that I would use is stodgy. I think when I think of boards, the one description I have, which is not Meme Callnin for the record, is stodgy, right?
Is.
And stodgy. What are you talking about?
Yeah, like stale.
Yes, I'm going to say that you're anti-stodgy, and that is that's the benefit. So so if you had your dream board, the kind of company that you would love to be on, what are the characteristics of the things, not necessarily in the industry or anything like that, but what are the characteristics you think you're really looking for?
I have spent a lot of time. I left Mercer at the end of April and fast forward a year. I've spent a lot of time really honing in on that because it is important that you define a dream board and just don't grab your first board, because one, the first board kind of sets the tone for the other boards that you'll be on. And two, you don't want to get in the place where you're like, gosh, I wish I'd never done this. So a couple of things that are important to me. One is culture. It needs to be an organization that cares about their people, because that's how I'm wired. If they don't care about their people, I'm going to get really frustrated, and they're going to get really frustrated with me. The other one is CEO. I have to like the CEO, but not just like them as a person, but really like the vision and kind of how they think about the organization and their people, how they partner with the board. So the CEO is key for me. The other thing for me that's important is I don't want an organization that's just kind of steady Eddie and they're doing good, maybe growing a little bit, but I want an organization that is they're ready to go to that next level or take that big growth jump, because that excites me. And then again, that's where I can bring value. So it all ties to what my unique kind of value prop is that I bring to a board. But that's what's important to me. I also, also the board members that you work with, because these are people you have to at times maybe go into battle with. So really being able to connect with them, I think, is important. So, it's a whole bunch of things that come together. And then I think it's listening to my gut. Does this feel like a good fit for me? So does that answer?
I love that. I love that so much. One of the things I'm curious about, Meme, I've known you for a long time. We've known you for a long time.
Thank you. I've been there.
You were there.
What would you as much wine as we did, Gail? That was us. We didn't always invite him.
Listen, don't call me out too much. What would you say is something that, might surprise people about what you would bring in a directorship, that you haven't said, maybe that is something unique or sets you apart, that would surprise folks?
That's a tough one, because I am who I am. Who is that? Popeye. I'm Popeye. So I don't know that there's that much that's going to be surprising about me. I'm very authentic. And so, and maybe that's, you said this whole stodgy thing, Bruce. If a board brings me on, which by the way, this wouldn't be a good fit for me anyway. But I am very real. And I'm going to engage in a very passionate way, which I would think that's what a board wants. But yet understanding that to actually be the person that delivers, the technician, the operational person, that's not who I am or can be anymore. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge for me too, to just kind of, oh, nope, I just got to ask the questions, and I can't roll up my sleeves so much. But none of that's surprising. All of that to me is kind of what you would expect from me or the role, et cetera. So I don't know if there's anything that really jumps out at me.
All right. A final question before we launch into our final question. So the penultimate question.
I love the penultimate question.
I know you've done a lot of really great work in the nonprofit world on some boards. What's something where you've been on a board and you've been really proud of, something you were involved with, whether that was a kind of strategic visioning or just helping them through a big project? Can you share something that made you really proud and made a huge impact?
Yeah, that's one that we're going through together right now, Gail. I'm very much in the middle of it. So as you know, I've been involved in the American Heart Association's Go Red for Women campaign board for many, many years, since I think 2018, a long time. Last year, I was the chair for the campaign, the overarching chair, which was a big honor and it was exciting. But I remember being up on that stage and awarding the Women of Impact, the woman who raises the most awareness, the most funds, and having this epiphany on the stage saying, wow, this is a way to raise awareness, really raise a lot of money in a very different way. We'd always focused on what we raised during the big campaign. It's a fundraiser, people come, we give money, and that always been the focus. So coming out of that, I then went to them and I said, hey, I actually think there's a place for a chair for the Women of Impact that has never existed in the AHA anywhere. And I said, I think that is the place we can have the biggest impact, and I'd like to chair that and own that. And I can say this, I can't say much about it because it's top secret, but we are on track to exceed more than we've ever done this year, and very excited about it. I've had them reach out and say, hey, other markets want to talk to me about this concept of a chair and how do you do that? So I think it will be a changing thing for the organization. And I'm very excited, very proud of the fact that I've done that, and very proud of the women who are actually our nominees this year, who are doing such an amazing job, including our teens.
Meme, so we have a good understanding. Why have you chosen to put that much effort into this organization?
So heart disease runs in my family, and I have a daughter. And I don't know. So as I've learned more and more just about the history of how doctors have approached heart disease, and it's all been focused on men, and that's shifted, and it's shifting, continues to shift. And I've learned that it's the number one killer of women. There's a lot of reasons that this really strikes a chord with me. And sorry, I'm going to go back to your earlier question. Anything I'm involved in, I have to be passionate about it because I'm giving of my time and I'm spending time with people that need to have a connection. And so this is something I really believe in. Like I said, I've been doing it since I think 2018. And every year I feel good about the impact I've had. And every year I find a different way to have a different impact and help continue to grow the organization locally. Like I'm a bit competitive. I really want Denver to rise to the top. I do things like engage great people like Gail to be part of it. So I'm always looking to bring other people on to be part of, if they have an aligned passion, to really help make an impact.
Yeah, I love that so much. Yeah. I think that it shows. In fact, when I asked that question earlier, which I know you weren't super prepared for, I kind of expected that you were going to go there, and you did. You got there, which is this idea of this needs to be a shared passion. And you are a whole person. You are not someone who, would walk away from the nonprofit work that you do because that is something that is ingrained in who you are and how you are for many, many years. And that's something I really admire about you.
So that brings us to our final question, Mimi, which is, what is the best advice that you've ever been given in your life, and why were you given that advice? We want the story behind the advice as to why you got it.
So it's funny. I did have a heads up on this question, so I've given it some thought. And I go back to when I was a child, even my parents saying, if you don't ask for something, you're never going to get it. And that could be anything from a Christmas present to a second. It could be anything, right? So I was raised with that. If you don't ask for something, you're not going to get it. Now, I don't think it's because I was shy and not asking. Anyway, I was raised with that. So as I think about my very first job, I applied for a job at Hewitt Associates. They weren't hiring in Atlanta. I just found out about them. I talked to them and they said, yes, we're not hiring, but we'll keep you in mind. And I asked, but why not now? I kept asking, and eventually they're like, you know what, we'll just hire you. So they brought me on board and kind of set me on my path. So as I think about as over the course of my career, as I, gained more experience and got more polished, more sophistication, I'm so sophisticated. That kind of transitioned for me. Now what I will say in a work world is raise your hand and raise it often. And the worst thing that can happen is somebody's going to say no or yes and if they've been working with Gail and Bruce. But what's the worst that can happen? And if you raise your hand and they say yes and, they know that you are looking to do more. And so that just sends a message right there. So I'm always telling people, raise your hand and raise it often. If I think about my career, every big change I've made is because I kind of went out on a limb and said, hey, I'm interested. Can I be part of this? That's how I went from Atlanta to New York. That's how I got from New York to here. That's how I got out of computer programming to consulting. That's how I got out of being siloed to broad. I think as you get further in your career, as an executive, it's not about raising your hand. They come and ask you to do stuff, but I'm always looking to younger people in their careers. Even now I'm continuing to mentor people, and I'm like, don't be shy, raise your hand and raise it often. And that to me, because when you raise your hand, it's because you want to do something. And I believe you should only do things in your career that feed you. And that's one way to kind of do that.
I think that also speaks to what you said earlier, this idea of questioning too. You are someone who, if someone says it can't be done, you will say, why? Why can't it be done? Or what if, or what would need to happen to make this happen, which then again gets people thinking differently, which is something we love to do as well, is this idea of don't get stuck in that box that you created for yourself, and continue to challenge and to question and to go all in. So I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, Meme Callnin, Thank you so much.
It's been amazing.
For being a guest on our show, Trailblazers. We really, really appreciate it.
What is the best way for someone to get in touch with you if maybe they have interest in bringing you in to discuss a board director opportunity?
I would say LinkedIn. Go on LinkedIn and send me a message. I'm on LinkedIn regularly, and I do respond.
Okay, perfect.
That's great.
That's fantastic. Thank you so
Thanks,
much for
Meme.
spending time with us, and I'm certain we'll see you soon.
Yes, we'll see you soon.
Yes, and thank you very much for having me and staying after me. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yay. Bye.
Bye.